And to start off tonight, I want to talk a little bit about what would be great for you guys to take a look at for Monday. Or for next Monday. This past Monday, we started with Code Academy and we started to learn some Python syntax within this lesson here, Python syntax, which is 13 kind of quote-unquote mini lessons long. I'm hoping that for Monday, and this is by no means required, but I think will really help you get more out of the Minecraft's Pi lessons if you do beforehand, would be to do the Python syntax and the strings and console output before class next Monday. I'm going to post this on Edmodo as well, but I really, really strongly recommend this to be able to go through Python syntax, which hopefully you've already gotten either done or a good chunk out of, and also strings and console output. Note that I am not saying tip calculator, and I am not saying date and time. You can do date and time and tip calculator, but you do not need to. Questions on that? No, if you're ahead of that, you are absolutely not going too fast. It's just those basics being able, like that would be great if you're done here, but these basics being able to understand what a string is and understand what a variable is and understand what an integer is are going to help you a lot with what we go through next week. So if you guys want to go through and spend 13 hours this weekend knocking all this out, that's awesome. But you don't need to at all. I just recommend Python syntax and strings and console output. All right, but we're not going to worry about Code Academy right now, so I'm actually going to exit out for right now. And I do want everybody to return to the webinar screen so I can take a look and see on my dashboard, I can see if you are paying attention, quote unquote, to this lesson. So if you're clicked into this lesson or if you're somewhere else. So please return your attention here. We're going to spend about the next 10 or 15 minutes talking, going through these notes, these slides on Monday. But I will say, once we get through these 10-15 minutes of kind of lecture notes, you all are playing a game, hopefully a game that you will find fun. So, I think it is fun. So just bear with me as we get through these notes. And this will help you kind of as an introduction before you play the game, an introduction more one-on-one before you go through more Code Academy. So here's some just sources that we got for these lessons. Wonderful, thank you, Al Swargart and Jason Briggs. Okay, so when you're going through these Code Academy lessons, you'll notice that at one point you were saving a number to a variable, and that variable was int, and you might not recall this, that's okay, but if you do recall that, you saved a number to int and you saved a number to float, or float, to int and to float. Well, Python recognizes two different kinds of number-based data types, and we're going to talk about data types in just a moment. But I just wanted to briefly introduce this. It's okay if you don't quite see what the difference is yet between an integer and a floating point number. We're not going to go into that level of detail right now, but just understand that Python understands whole numbers differently than it understands numbers with a decimal. Numbers that are whole numbers, no decimal, are called integers. Numbers that do have a decimal are called floating point numbers. Okay, this is an example of an expression in Python. You can see up here what it looks like in idle or IDLE, which we'll get to at the end of class. I'll explain what idle is at the end of class, or at the end of this kind of mini lecture. And hopefully you guys saw this in Codecademy. This is what young engineers of today deems using Python as a calculator. Right, you're adding, subtracting, multiplying numbers. And the way that it works is you have an operator, and that operator is surrounded by two values. Here, 5 and 5. So again, value, operator, value. The value is of type integer, and the operator is the addition operator. There are several basic mathematical operators that Python understands: addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. And in all of them, it expects there to be a number before the operator and a number after. If there isn't, if we break that expectation, that's when we get a syntax error. If you remember from Monday, we went through and looked at the examples of, comparing a syntax error to a grammatical error or an error of the English language. This is like if you had a sentence, or you tried to make a sentence, the cat's yellow. Well, this just is not a sentence because it does not have a verb. So that would be like a syntax error. Here, you have a value on one side of the operator, but not on the other. So it's not a valid expression in Python. It's not what Python expects. It's not what it understands. It won't let you run that code. If you had a super long code, very, very long, with 500 lines of perfectly written code, and then your last line said 5+, you just hit enter, none of your code would work. It would say invalid syntax, and none of your code would be able to run. So, and we'll take more of a look at this on Monday. So, for those of you who got into strings in Codecademy, you might recognize this. For those of you who have not, Python understands numbers, we saw that, integers and floating points, and it understands what they are. It understands them like humans understand them in a way, that 5 plus 5 gives you the value 10. It understands them like a number. Strings are a way to pass words into Python, like the word dog. They can be denoted by quotation marks. So you have the double quotation marks before and after, or by single quotation marks or apostrophes before and after. These are absolutely the same thing. These are equivalent. This one just uses quotation mark. This one uses apostrophe, but it's the same. Python does not understand this as a word. It does not understand that this is a word of its own, that this character D, this character O, and this character G together form a word. It does not understand that that word is a mammal. Nothing about that. The way that strings work are that any of the characters inside, Python just recognizes as one string. It does not try to figure out what's inside that string. It just treats it as just all those characters together. So this entire sentence, it does not realize that there are 4 separate words. This is just one string. This string, 22. Python no longer recognizes this as the number 22. It could be anything inside of the quotation marks. You're not going to be able to add 22 and 22, or 22 in any number, because now it's a string. So you absolutely do not need to get idle out. I just want to show this to explain. We're going to get idle out on Monday, but for right now, I just want to show this example. So Python understands what 22 is. That's 22. And if you give it the string 22, it's going to respond with the string 22, which, seems like the same thing. But if you take 22 plus 7, both of these as integers, it understands that this is the value, that we recognize as 22, and when you add 7 to that value, it becomes 29. If you take the string 22 and try to add the number 7 to it, you get a syntax error, because those are two different kinds of data types. You can't add them together. Well, what if you take 22 and add the string 7? Well, that's just going to combine these two characters with this character to make one string with 3 characters. It no longer understands as the number 22, now it's the string. All right. And you can see the bottom there is just symbols, and that is acceptable. So just like how 22 plus 7 just became 227, Python does not understand that these are individual words that you're trying to make into like a sentence. If you add hello plus my plus name plus is, this is an operator that works with strings, but it's not going to add the spaces for you. The space is actually a character of its own. And for you to make this something that a human can read, you would have to actually physically add those spaces yourself. All right. The reason I just added this slide, I want you to understand that Python has some idea, what an integer is, and you can manipulate them like humans would, like 6 plus 7 is 13. But it doesn't know that you're using the word hello. It just thinks of this as a string with 5 characters inside. Here you see another syntax error. It expected there to be another quotation mark. Since there isn't another quotation mark, it's not going to let this code run. Again, this is like a sentence that doesn't have a verb. Boolean logic is another kind of data type, and this is one that you should have seen in Codecademy. So Boolean logic is a kind of true-false logic. The only 2 values in the Boolean data type are true and false. And they're used in conditional expressions, like if statements, and we've used them in Scratch. So if a condition is true, execute these lines of code. And you can take a look down here at these Scratch blocks. Spacebar pressed, this can only be true or false. Either the spacebar is pressed or the spacebar is not pressed. This is either a true or false. Same with this. And we'll see an example of this very soon. So, well, let's keep on with this for a moment. So now we've learned about 4 different kinds of data types: integers, floating point numbers, and these are both act like numbers, the Boolean data type, which only has 2 values, true and false, and strings, which are like words or collections of characters. You can store any of these data types inside of a variable. And you do that using the assignment operator, which is a single equal sign. You assign a variable a value using an assignment statement that will always look like this. So we can take a look at this one. Age is your variable name, and here you're assigning it the value 3, which is an integer. If you look at this second example, you're taking the variable with the variable name name and assigning it the string value Dubik. Now this is very important, so listen up to what I'm about to say. Notice that your variables are not strings. Notice that your variables are not strings. They do not have quotation marks around them. That's because with this assignment statement that you're doing, this assignment statement, you're telling Python, hey, Python, learn the characters A, G, E. From now on, when I use these, I really mean the number 3. hey, Python, learn this, learn NAME, learn name. From now on, when I use these, I really mean the string Dubik. So it's a way of kind of teaching Python a word. You could think of it like that. A variable does not use quotations. A variable can hold a string, just like it can hold an integer or a number. But a variable name is not a string. It does not have quotation marks around it. All right, a little bit about variables. I like to think about them as big cardboard boxes that you can put values, that you can store values inside. So here you have the cardboard box with the label box on the outside, and you can store the value 4 in it. So when you ask, hey, what's the value inside the box, it will return 4. And now, anywhere that you would want to use the number 4, you can instead use the word box. Notice, it does not have strings around it. It does not have quotation marks around it. It's not a string. So here you have the variable different box, and if you wanted to assign it the value 4, you could simply use the word box, because Python has now learned this to have the value 4. You can also reassign a variable a value. So for example, here you have box and you put 4 inside, or you assign it the value 4. In this third line, you can reassign box the value 8. Notice you're not adding 8 to the value of box. Before it was 4, now it is 8. Functions are named, reusable sequences of code. So, if you guys can think back, well, you would have seen this in Codecademy with the print function that allows you to print to the console. But if you guys can think back to Scratch, we would use built-in functions a lot. And they're just a way to name a sequence of code so that you're able to reuse it without having to put all the blocks together every time. So if you remember this block, if on edge bounce, this is a built-in function that Scratch added to make it easier for users to do something like a bouncy ball. So now a user can use this block, if on edge bounce, instead of having to use this combination of blocks, which is definitely more complicated. Really, if on edge box is absolutely equivalent to this here. It's saying, you know, for your bouncy ball, if your bouncy ball is touching the edge, if this is true, then take the direction that the bouncy ball is pointing, add 180 to it, and now have the bouncy ball point in that direction. These are the same thing, it's just much easier to use this. So, a function are just named, reusable sequences of code. If statements operate off of Boolean logic. An if statement will run a sequence of code only if a condition is true. So we're going to take a look back at idle for a moment. Now, we've used the assignment operator, so I can take var and I can assign the value 3 to it. Or I can take another var and I can assign a string to it, any string. I'll assign it Sandy, the name of my dog. This is the assignment operator. It says, hey, Python, learn these characters. From now on, this is going to be a variable, and for right now, it's storing the value 3. Because now I can say var, and it will respond 3. If I want to make a variable called age, I can't refer to it until I've used this assignment operator and let Python know, hey, I want to make these characters age a variable. And so you're saying, hey, it's going to be a variable. It's going to store the value 4 for right now. And now Python understands. if you want to say something is equal to, and I had this question in my other class, that's why I'm bringing this up now, you can't say, you can say 3 plus 3 is 6. So you might think, hey, can I say 3 plus 3 equals 6? I should be able to say that. But you can't. This is not the equals to operator. This operator is saying, what this line is basically reading is, hey, Python, from now on, this combination of symbols is going to be able to represent the integer 6. That's just not how it works. You can only use it with variables. You can only use the assignment operator with variables. Instead, if you wanted to say 3 plus 3 is 6, really what you're saying is 3 plus 3 equivalent to 6? Question mark? Just like these Boolean blocks in Python, or in Scratch. So notice that I'm using two equal signs together. That's the equivalency operator. So you're saying, does 3 plus 3 equal 6? And it will respond true, because it does. And someone said, who is that? Avas asked, so var plus age equals 7? Let's ask. Does var plus age equal to equal sign 7? True, it does. How about var times age? Does var times age equal 7? False, it does not. Is 3 bigger than 4? False, it is not. So, if statements use this, and that's what we were just talking about. An if statement will run a sequence of code only if a condition is true. So if var is equal to 7, print, let's say this, if age is equal to 10, print, you get to hear a joke. Notice, since age is equal to 4, age was set to hold the value 4, that means that age equal to 10 is false, so this line is not run. If I change it to if age equivalent to 4, print, you get to hear a joke. You get to hear a joke is printed. So this print line will only run dependent on whether or not the condition that's being checked by the if statement is true or false. And again, you guys use this in Scratch. You would have your sprite move to the right only if a certain key was being pressed. The last thing we're going to talk about are loops. And you use loops in Scratch as well. You would use loops to repeat a sequence of code, either a set number of times, like when you wanted Scratch-Cat to move across the screen, forever, if you were doing something like checking to see if the ball was hitting the paddle, or, and we haven't done this yet, but until a condition is false. That's a while loop, and we'll get to that. Okay, so you guys took a look at Codecademy on Monday. And again, I think it would be super beneficial if you took another look at Codecademy between now and next Monday, and I'll go over that at the end. Today, in just a moment, we're going to take a look at something called Code Combat, which is a game that utilizes Python. And lastly, next week, you're going to be using IDLE, or Python's interactive development environment, to control Minecraft on your Raspberry Pi. Now, someone in the last class said, hey, I've never used Python, but this Codecademy Python sure looks similar to idle. Well, idle is just the name for Python's development environment. Python is the programming language itself. And kind of every programming language, you're going to be able to run it with different development environments. It's just the area that you code in. Okay? The language that you're coding in is Python. The area, that's your development environment. And we're going to be using idle to control Minecraft on our Raspberry Pis. So let's take a look at Code Combat. I'm going to open Code Combat first on my computer, and then I'm going to send out the link, because I do want you all to be paying attention to a few things before you just jump off on your own. So Code Combat is a combination of several different kinds of games. One, it's like Codecademy. You are practicing coding. Two, it's like a puzzle game, because you've got to be able to solve a certain amount of puzzles. And three, it's like a fighting game. You need to keep track of your armor and your weapons. Make sure that you have good hit points and such. Okay, and actually, what's really great is that you don't have to create an account. So everyone kind of starts to let you create an account. So don't feel pressured at the beginning to create an account. At the beginning, kind of the first world, so I'll show you the different worlds. Taking a moment to load here. The first world is pretty simple. I mean, there are definitely some puzzles and challenges to it, but overall it's pretty simple. As it starts to go along, though, it gets more and more complicated, more similar to a fighting game, and overall more fun. And once you get pretty good, you can play multiplayer, and you can play with other people. And pretty much it's like, instead of just being able to click, like if you've ever played an action game before, you can, so the further you get in the game, it's more like that. In the beginning, you're kind of using codes to walk around, just as you learn how to play the game and just as you learn coding. But the further you go, the kind of more fun that it gets. Alright, in just a moment I will send out the code, but I want to go through the first level of you guys watching my screen, just so that I explain kind of what you should be reading. So you'll start out with this little character. You're going to start out with shoes. The way you equip things is by double clicking them. Okay, so you'll notice that I have actually a few more. So I've already done this level, so let me delete this stuff first. The goal is to use these, what are called methods, to get you to gather all of the different gems. Man, it's not going to let me do this. Sorry, guys. And so you've got to get the different gems, and it will stop you at these different circles. So let's say there was a circle in the middle of these two, then you would have to run move right twice. So you move right to go this way, move down, and move right. And what you're doing is you can think about self as a variable that refers to your player. And you can think about move down, move left, move right, move up as functions. They're called methods, but you can think about them as functions, kind of. And you do need those parentheses. A little bit further into the game, you're going to get to looping, if-then statements, strings. You're going to get to a lot of different setting variables. The strings are the names of your enemies, and you'll actually have to put the names of your enemies in quotation marks. So it's a great way to learn. So I'm going to go ahead and send out this information. And I want you guys to try it out on your own. And if you have any questions, let me know what level you are that you kind of get stuck at. I think the looping one is one that kind of can trip people up. So maybe I'll go to that one in a few minutes and show people how to get past it. So go ahead and try that link out. So I'll give everyone a few minutes. If I don't get any questions, in about 10 minutes, I'll run true names. So I am here right now. I'm going to be here this whole time. If you have a question, let me know. But I'm not really going to be talking a lot since I'm not leading anything. So you just got to reach out, shoot me a question, raise your hand if you run into a question. And I want you, as you play the game, to challenge yourself. Think, what am I typing right now? Am I typing a variable? Am I typing a function? Can I see a string in any of this? Do I see an integer in any of this? And remember, this is all in preparation for next week. I'm actually going to go ahead, for those of you watching the recording, I'll show how true names work. And then for those of you at home who are doing it, if you want to come back, I can kind of go backwards and show you at any point. Oh, there's like a secret. That's cool. Oh, you have to pay for the secret one. I did not know about that. So I'm going to show this one and the looping one to those of you watching the recording, so that way I can stop the recording at that point. You don't have to watch 10 minutes of silence. So it's okay if you guys are at the webinar now and aren't to this level. You can kind of ignore what I'm talking about and you can focus on your own level. So notice that that was Brack. So what already happened is that my person moved to the right. Then she self-attack Brat. And that's a method that's attached to this sword. And if you hover over the sword, it tells so much information about how to work it. Oops. So if you look at the attack method makes the hero attack the target unit, and you put a string inside the parentheses to say which target unit to attack. So those are the parameters. It's very cool, and it was functions that you know. So anyway, for right now, in order to do it, you need to move right again, because you're in this room and you need to get to Treg. You need to self-attack. And by self-attack, you're not attacking yourself. You're telling this variable, which your character is kind of tied to, you need to attack the enemy, who is named Treg. And Treg is a string. And you need to do it twice. You must attack small ogres twice. And then I'll do self.move right. Oh, and it looks like I need to move to the right one more time. Great, so that seemed to work. Alright, and I'm just working through this next one, which is really similar, so that I can show you all the looping one. Self.attack, Gert, self.attack, attack, attack, Trig. Oh, and I think the last one is Rig. Alright, and I didn't survive, so I think it's going to prompt me that I need to go and get better armor. It should prompt me. So yeah, so if you check on help, they'll give you tips like, hey, you need to get the tarnished bronze breastplate in order to win, and make sure that you're attacking them twice, which I did not do.